This week on the Business and Marketing Scoop, I am talking with Shane Clarke all about the VQ. Shane, thanks for joining me today.
You're welcome.
So you are Director of Operations at the VQ.
I am indeed.
I would say there's a lot of people around Cork who have heard of the VQ.
Yeah.
Like myself, currently our business is kind of located in that area. But as an organisation, what does the VQ do?
Okay, so maybe as a very, very quick bit of background, some 10, 12 years ago, there was a coming together of the business community down there. Some of the well-known traders, Vibes and Scribes and the Metropole and Gallagher's and so on, Shelburne, and they were the McCurtain Street traders. And this, I think, when McCurtain Street maybe had hit a bit of a low point in its sort of history, and part of their sort of boosterism and enthusiasm and so on and so forth, and it started to get a name for itself and new businesses started to arrive. Then they transformed into what everyone was calling at the time the Victorian Quarter. So the council used it, they used it, and again they used that term sort of rather loosely, and again just a loose association of really good neighbours, but they started then going out and making their sort of common cause allowed them to have a conversation about the street with the city council, and actually said, look, it isn't working at the moment, it's a dual carriageway, can we think about how it looks in the future? And actually that conversation has now turned out what we see before us in terms of the public realm. And then come COVID, almost counterintuitively, two things happened. One is that the developments at Penrose, Dock and Horgan's Quay happened and started filling out, and also there was an influx of new and really exciting and some very brilliant food and drinks business into McCurtain Street in COVID, and they made the decision, look, at the end of the busy day it's hard to run an organisation once you've done your 40, 50-hour week. Let's do this professionally. And 17 of those businesses had voluntarily been putting their hands in their pocket for about 2 years. And they decided, let's fund somebody else to do their bidding. And they put it out 2 days a week. And we might talk about it. This is my sort of background in London. And I said, look, I think I can help you. So I basically work for not just the 17 now, but approaching 50 membership paying businesses. So it's a voluntary subscription membership service, from the corner shop to some of the big corporates. And we will aim to grow to 75 and to 100 and use our leverage then as a business community to articulate a really positive vision for that neighborhood. So it's businesses coming together using their entrepreneurial nous and their neighborliness and having some civic pride and turning that not just to their advantage, but I think really, really importantly to the city's advantage, to the local residents' advantage. Because what's good for the city, what's good for the residents is good for the businesses and vice versa.
Brilliant. Deadly. So it came organically, I suppose, over time, really. It wasn't like there was a plan for this organisation to be.
No. I think that's its strength. This morning I was in a meeting with Heineken. We were having a very interesting conversation with Heineken. And so I had Gallagher's in that meeting, long-standing pub. I had Babelfish, a newly arrived media agency. And I had Gabriel House, the owner of which is our chairman, Liam Maher. And I think that meeting with me is the paid sort of, factotum, and those three board members and the long-standing brewery just give a nice flavour of the organic sort of ground-upness, if that's a word, of the community. It really is. I work for fabulous people. I work with fabulous people, and the community of people who are coming in actually are equally matching that in a different sort of fashion.
Deadly. So if we take a step back and talk about Shane. Okay. How did you get, I suppose even before how you got involved with the VQ, how did you get into the area that you're in?
So I'm a Dublin born, but went to college in London and degree in philosophy. I have an ology, bollocksology. And I remember there was a time, there was two, I came out of college and I had two job offers. I did a master's after that, but I had two job offers, one in Dublin to work for an arts organisation and one in London to work for what was the Department of the Environment at the time. And I hummed and I hawed and I took the Department of the Environment job. And I was put into the urban regeneration section. And there's for people who know regeneration, Richard Rogers, famous architect, did a very famous study on cities back in the late 90s. And I was tasked I mean, I was the corner boy in the office. I was tasked with answering ministerial correspondence on this, and
that must have been a bit of a baptism of fire, though. Then straight out of college, was it?
It was interesting. I didn't last that long there, actually, because I felt like I was, essentially, you're a civil service. You're entirely neutral, and I would have politics that maybe, would not be neutral, or like to voice expressions, and that's not what you do in the civil service. So, fabulous training in terms of minutes and running boards and all that sort of stuff. Absolutely fantastic training. But I did feel like I was shuffling somebody else's papers, Yeah. At one stage, I was ridiculously. I was the expert in the UK on allotments, and I had never been to an allotment. So that was an amazing experience, and it was, again, part of my master's degree in cultural studies was around cities. So cities has sort of been in the blood for a while, and then I stayed in London for 20 years and worked through various different urban governance and urban management jobs. At one stage, I had 40 people working for me in the West End of London and Soho and stuff. I've worked in some poor neighbourhoods, some very wealthy neighbourhoods, and for 9 years I was deputy director of what's called a business improvement district in London Bridge. So my background, both academically to a certain extent, but also in terms of the day-to-days, was cities, and it's just something I love, towns and cities. And if we go on holidays, I go to the wife, let's go to Amsterdam. She goes, no, let's go to I don't know. Let's go to the Canaries. So we alternate.
You want to be in the cities.
Yeah.
And I suppose after all that, what was it that brought you back to Ireland and then back to Cork?
So 2016, the year of Brexit, and it's a coincidence it was the year of Brexit, but we sort of made a decision, myself and my wife, that much as we love London, and I miss London a lot, there's a great place. It's a great place to bring up kids. But actually, we've been there for 20 years, and that if we didn't come back home, we'd be there for another 20 years. I'm perfectly happy for 20 years. So the kids had just started school. They were very happy at school. It was around the corner. We lived in Peckham, brilliant, absolutely amazing neighbourhood. But we thought, look, let's do it now. If we don't do it now, we never will. And although I'm from Dublin, we thought, let's maybe have a look around to see if we might do something different. And there was a work connection, actually, that pointed out Cork City to me. And I, again, being a Dubliner, knew nothing about... I know West Cork, but I knew nothing about the city. And we came across, did some research, and I was just really taken with it, actually, as a city, There's amazing topography that's up and down, that's largely intact. The highway engineers hadn't really got to it. The Germans had never bombed it. There hadn't been the huge mass social housing estates that you see in English cities. So actually, although it was untidy and messy, and McCurtain Street is a prime example of it, you could see it had marvellous sort of urban bone structure. And one of the lines in the document that was given to me was that if it was a trade, if they were a trading house, they'd have put down Cork as a buy option. And I remember thinking that's an interesting way. And their tagline was big on life, big on education, big on job opportunities, and big on quality of life. And I think we thought, look, if it doesn't work out, we can go.
Yep.
And then there was a bit of gestation in this, but actually a week after arriving, I got the job as the CEO of a new museum and community centre called Nano Nago Place. So we sort of landed on our feet.
I'm presuming that was in the works before you arrived.
Well, it was in the works in that. It was in the works in that I had an interview. That was in the works. And you never know.
Yeah.
And I came through that, and it turned out to be. It turned out it was an amazing experience. I stayed there for 6 years. It was amazing because I was running my own show for the first time, so I was the CEO, and all the learning and the tensions and the stresses that go with that. It was a fabulous learning experience. At the interview, ultimately I was working for the Presentation Sisters, nuns, and I remember saying at the interview, I thought, I better clear the ground here. I'm not a person of any faith. Shall we continue the interview? And they said, absolutely, if you believe in education and you pay due respect to our history. And actually, a more remarkable group of women I couldn't have hoped to meet. Absolutely astounding. So, the board is largely secular, and the team, obviously, that I put together was largely secular, but an amazing experience.
Brilliant.
Could have gone otherwise. I didn't know what I was getting into, but it was great. It was really great.
So following on then from Nanonagle, were you working, you set up for yourself basically after that then?
So in December 21, we had been finalists for the Council of Europe Museum Prize. And the Museum Prize is a subset of the Council of Europe Museum of the Year. It's hugely prestigious award. Covers it's the European community, really, rather than just the European Union. So it goes out to some 50 countries and so on. And the Museum Prize was particularly was awarded to those museums that really elevated democracy and human rights within their museum culture, and actually embedded within the museum, first and foremost. Embedded within our museum, we had a number of community groups. The Lantern Centre, which worked with vulnerable older people in terms of community education. We had the Cork Migrant Centre, which worked with new arrivals in Europe. Originally would have been Eastern European, but actually by the time I finished, the priority really was in terms of direct provision families. And there was a men's group there. And also in terms of the way that we worked with the community, the way we worked with organic gardening, the way we worked with education. So we were a museum, but a museum that was part of a much wider philosophy of essentially making Cork a better place, if you want to put it that way. So we were awarded that, and that brought me up to sort of 5.5 years in the post. And I thought, well, look, I was sort of employee number one, although the fabulous restoration job had been done, brilliant architects, Jack Hall and Associates. So they sort of gave me the key, and I opened the door and employed the staff. So I just thought it was a good time to sort of take a step back and say, okay, I think I've done my bit, and maybe to pass the baton to somebody else. And actually also, the other side of the coin is get back to that, which was my original love, which is towns and cities. So decided to take a chance, set up my own consultancy, garden, city culture. So city speaks for itself. I've talked about that. Culture, I suppose, I'd run a museum for 6 years, and actually I did a master's many years ago in humanities and cultural studies, and worked with the Tate and the British Film Institute and so on. And then garden, in terms of that, was supposed to encapsulate greening, and I'd done an awful lot of urban greening in London, but increasingly obsessed, if not concerned, but inspired by nature, both in the city and outside the city, and nature-based solutions. So set that up, and then literally set that up, sort of signed the company documents, and then I saw an ad in the paper for the VQ, and I thought, that's an alignment. And I knew some of the characters in any case, but I thought, look, this is really fabulous ballast for the consultancy ship. And I said, look, I think I can really do something for you. I can get you on the road in a really strategic way, in addition to the sort of operations title to the role, and so that's been fabulous, and it's opened doors in Cork for me, and it's opened doors in Ireland. So it's been a great start.
Brilliant.
Yeah,
I suppose it's safe to say anybody in Cork has seen a massive transformation in VQ, but particularly in McCurtain Street over the last number of years. Yeah. Obviously, that transformation is still ongoing. Looking out down the line, what are your major hopes for McCurtain Street and the greater VQ area? So,
in terms of the neighbourhood, I said we're in a meeting with Heineken this morning, and that sort of bookmarks it at that side, that sort of western side, and on the eastern side, going down past Kent Station, whatever's in the Docklands there. I think our imperial ambitions are not going to send us across the river. Sort of a spur up to St. Luke's. I think a number of things from my background in terms of urban design is that the area becomes cohesive. Traditionally it would have started in McCurtain Street, but actually, that we want to see it expand and grow and join up with what is happening down on the docks in Horgan's Quay and Penrose Dock on that side. The multi-million-pound investment at the moment from Cork City Council and the NTA, it's been a challenging year for the businesses. If somebody's if you're getting your kitchen done up, it's a pain in the backside. Where the builders are in there for 2 weeks and then they're gone and you forget about it. So we're in the position whereby the works will be largely finished in a couple of weeks.
Brilliant.
I was walking down there this morning. The trees have gone in. Two-way will happen in mid-late November. I'll have a bit of snagging into the new year, but I think come the spring, if I bring friends of mine who've come from London or family who come down from Dublin and show them McCurtain Street in the spring, they'll go, "Oh my goodness, just bloody amazing!"
Awesome.
And on the back of that, then we'll see greater footfall. And on the back of that, we'll see more investment in terms of the businesses. And I think areas such as, say, Coburg Street, which is on the west side of McCurtain Street, which has always been sort of really a way to sort of motor through, not a particularly pleasant environment. You can already see that smartening up. There's been businesses down there painting up the businesses and so on.
The comedy club is down there as well.
Comedy club is down there. Hotel is down there. Heineken is across the other side, and then Shandon is a bit further. We're not going to expand in that way, but actually, I think maybe in people's mental maps, Shandon is a million miles away from McCurtain Street when actually it's only a 5-minute walk, and we got to make them more comfortable walking that direction. We want to see more in terms of corporate social responsibility. So some of the the very experienced and talented and well remunerated businesses actually we're starting to link out to our schools and to community groups. One of the things that was very important to me on the back of what I know about doing Regen is that while we're a business group first and foremost, that's who pays my wages and that's how it's funded. Actually, it's very, very important that we've got a relationship with the local schools. So there's about 13 schools and colleges in the area, so hundreds of staff, thousands of students. And their interest, my feeling is there's a Venn diagram which overlaps safety, beauty, opportunity, identity, residents associations, and then the sort of civic society. And so we're part of that conversation. And I think when we grow from where we are now, 40, 50, hopefully in the next couple of weeks, into 75 sort of next year. And it's about really having lots and lots of conversations with, those who are making big investment decisions and small investment decisions in the area and saying, look, can you tweak it in this direction? Because this is how we think we can all align together. So at heart, I think, is civic pride. It's the civic pride on the part of those that started it up and those who joined. And, if we can help the corner shop sell more Mars bars, marvellous, and the coffee shop sell more coffees, great. But I think actually the sort of sweet spot actually is you generally have a community that's talking together. And that's a very nice thing to be part of.
Cool, man. How long are you as the head of operations there now?
So I started in July. So not that long.
Yeah, we're going to say you hit the ground running anyway, for sure.
Yeah, well, look, I hit the ground running. I used the metaphor before, but the baton was passed by people who've been doing laps for a couple of years. And it is brilliant when you get Noreen Gann or you get Liam Maher being able to walk into a room with me and they open doors. Yeah, and it's just and they know. One of the marvelous things about Cork, it's almost a perfect size city. It's a sort of a sweet spot in a city in that it's a size where you can get stuff done
because everyone knows everyone.
Yeah, there's real challenge. There's real challenge to that as well. There's a sort of a small c conservatism that often comes with that, but it's not unwieldy like Dublin where it goes morphs forever and it just seems to be impossible to get things done. Yeah, interesting. London is vastly bigger again than Dublin, but it's interesting in that it's made up of quite discrete but very strong neighbourhoods, such as, say, London Bridge. So in a funny sort of way, it's at the other end of the scale. It sort of works. It's probably easier to get things done in London than it is to get things done in Dublin.
Yeah. That's mad. Yeah. So it's just the way they're structured versus, say, somewhere like Dublin is.
Well, I mean, London has. Well, again, it's interesting. You look at New York. New York's got 5 boroughs. Manhattan, Brooklyn, Queens, Staten Island, and the Bronx. London has 32 boroughs, and then the City of London on top of that. Now it also happens to, it has Westminster there as a sort of government, and then within any of those boroughs, there's probably about 5 different sort of areas, all of which are strong. Anyway, so it means that of the 32, some will be bloody useless, but some will be bloody brilliant. Yeah. And then it sort of comes. So all your eggs aren't in one basket. So I think that's one of the strengths of something like the VQ is that if Cork is as it grows, has areas which have a discernible identity and a strong network. So maybe it's Ballincollig, maybe it's the VQ, maybe it's Douglas. that there is a strength in that, and actually particularly if we're all sort of talking to each other.
I was going to say, it's a collaboration between those groups as well, I would imagine, is extremely important.
Yeah, and I think you're starting to see that happen. And it will definitely happen in the future. Just because it's nice not to feel like you're on your own, to have a peer network. And your issues are the same, and they're the same in most every city, crime and environment always come up, and they'll come up in 100 years' time, and they came up 100 years ago. So sustainability didn't come up 100 years ago, or maybe it did in terms of the factories spewing out whatever it is. But a lot of the issues are the same. The businesses want to be able to trade, and there's a tension between trading and living, and that's the continual challenge and joy of what a city is. But you find the same things happening in the same cities around the world.
Yeah, you mentioned the word challenge a lot.
Yeah.
What have been kind of the biggest ones that you've either biggest challenges you've had or biggest ones you've overcome since you started with the VQ?
Well, look, I think I'm doing this through a consultancy. I'm effectively a paid employee, but I'm doing it through a consultancy. So, last job, Nano and I got placed. I'm the boss. I have a budget, £1.5 million. I say, obviously through the proper channels of board governance and so on. But I go, okay, that's the vision for 3 years, and now we do this, and it gets done. Or back before that, sort of London Bridge, significant amounts of money, and you're able to get things. You either have the staff or you have the money, and that's what I don't have in this position. And I would love to. So there's a dialogue with those that do have the funding and the resources. So that's whether it's the Guards or whether that's the Bus Éireann or whether that's Irish Rail or whether it's the council. So that, I suppose, just in terms of my being able to operate, not quite with the flick of a switch, that's not quite the case, but that is a challenge. So but the reverse side of that, part of this job and part of other jobs is really, I'm going to say it now, is to get other people to do your bidding. Is that if we can articulate a vision for the area and people buy into it, so they go, we like this world-class idea you have around tables and chairs and outdoor dining, and then everybody starts saying that. So and so you've done your back and forth, you've talked to the small business, you've talked to businesses, you've talked to the council, you've talked to the Guards, and you've gone back and you get a sort of picture of what it looks like, such that it really becomes somebody else's idea. So that whomever is spending money, whether it's a developer who's actually designing his building such that it would incorporate, say, tables and chairs, or the cafe that's just arrived in the area, and rather than saying, I'm being unfair here, rather than saying do B&Q furniture, they're going to spend an extra 50% to do something really nice. Or in terms of the council, then changing policy such as to facilitate maybe a more area-wide business. So that's 3 different sorts of investor, if you like, or partner that are delivering change on the back of what we've put together as a vision for the area, which would have been the case in previous jobs as well, but it's easier if you front load it with your own money. If you can show, look, there's one we did earlier, and people go, oh yeah, okay, I can see that works. So that's I suppose a personal challenge given where I've been, and just having the call on those decisions and that finance.
It's more rewarding then when you actually overcome them.
Yeah, but look, one of the things that you see about cities and neighbourhoods, and everyone's got an opinion. You go on Twitter particularly, everyone's got an opinion, and it's brilliant that people are passionate about their cities, because there's a lot of cities around the world, across in our neighbours in the UK, where there's apathy or there's depression because the talent has left or the young people have left. Cork has got an embarrassment of riches in terms of its potential. Corkonians obsessed with their city, and there's a seriously bright and diverse demographic of people who've arrived, whether from Eastern Europe, whether from Asia, whether from Africa, or whether it's returnees, and they've all got an opinion about it. And one of the things that I know that happens with cities, and I think this statement was maybe articulated by Gil Bates with regard to technology, is that sort of nothing happens in 1 or 2 years and then everything happens in 10 years. And actually it's sort of the same with cities. You just don't see anything happening in 1 or 2 years, and then you look back in 10 years and go, oh my goodness, it's changed massively. And I think maybe when we talked earlier, I was using the analogy of, if you could get a 10% return on your investment anywhere, like the bank or a company, well, first thing I think you have to do is just check out if it's not a Ponzi scheme. But actually, 10% is doubles in 7 years.
Yeah.
And if you got that return, my God, just bite somebody's hand off, because that's an amazing return, and then it doubles again. So it's 4 times bigger
over time.
And I think that's where sort of cities are. So actually, if it's 10%, people 10% is tiny. 10% actually produces massive compound growth in terms of a change of a place over those period of times. And already you see it in it's not the VQ's doing, in terms of Horkins Quay and
Penrose and all
Penrose
that
Dock, and the businesses that come in. And just think back to, say, 7 years ago when I arrived in Cork, and Son of a Bun was there as a shining light. Or go back 3 years before that, where I'd heard it was like it was kebab and a cab. So cities do change, and we're going through a real spurt now in terms of McCurtain Street at the moment, and that'll sort of calm down for a bit. But I think part of our job is to say, look, stay with us and be part of guiding that change over that period of time. Day to day, you might know the difference, and to some extent, maybe I'm 20 years in this business, I don't sweat the day to day too much. It's very important. But as long as we're getting that 10% every year, that's where we want to be.
Brilliant. Well, I think with anything, you're always going to have to take a few steps back to get those further steps forward. Yeah. So, I mean, there's, not to be cliche, but you're going to have the pain to get the gain. Yeah. And that is, I think, and McCurtain Street's a really good example of that, because obviously people might be put out with traffic, whatever was happening there. But my God, it's a different place, completely different place than what it was 10 years ago. Like it's like, I'm very bullish on Cork. I love Cork. Yeah. I grew up outside the city, but I've been in the city for a long time now. And God, I think the potential here is massive. Like you said, just people coming here from all over the world. The communities here are very strong, I think. More organisations, I think, like the VQ for, as you say, like Ballincollig, Carrigaline, Douglas. I think things like that would be fantastic. Yeah. And it's very, very, my vibe in Cork at the moment is very, very positive. As in, I see this as a growing city, somewhere that potentially organisations from all around the world can come to and do business. And that should be able to help the city grow and hopefully create these amazing spaces and streets along the way that we can all be really, really proud of.
I would share that sort of bullish outlook, and probably more so now than any time of the 7 years. You can see it's and maybe going back to what I said about the 10-year sort of picture, it's starting to cohere. I think COVID actually will in retrospect have been a very good experience for Cork, and Cork City should be proud of what it did in sort of in terms of pedestrianisation on that side, in terms of some of the boosterish investment. It looks like from my limited understanding from the outside that some of the finances are adding up for the Docklands in terms of particularly housing. We need a much better public transport system. We need a doubling of the ambition, I think, on the public transport system. And from an urbanist point of view, we need people living back in the city. Yeah. We need a mix in the city, but we also need some wealth in the city. We need some wealth back in the city. But as a city, I think that actually, because it's got a very, very strong sort of civic ecosystem, I think we can go through sort of a growth and bringing some of the wealth back in, whilst warding off some of the rougher edges of gentrification. I think we can bring people with us all the way on that side. A city needs to work because of its citizens first. Because if you keep happy citizens first, you'll attract businesses in, you'll attract foreign direct investment, you'll attract tourists in. I would share a very positive outlook for the city. Yeah,
and look, that's not to ignore the challenges here. You mentioned two of the biggest ones would be housing and public transport.
Yeah.
What's happening in that space at the moment that you're in earshot of, maybe, that is hopefully some positive news?
Well, on the housing, my understanding actually is that there has been a significant increase. If you look at the census figures, there's been a significant increase below the radar for most people of people living in the city centre, or in the city, or just the immediate sort of Victorian belt outside that. So actually, the city centre population is growing. If the Docklands comes with 25,000 people on top of that, again, that'll take sort of 15 years. Then you've got a sort of a European scale level of population in the centre. I think we need to see more housing, we need to see more infill. We got this vast potential of putting people living above the shop. We've been talking about it for donkey's years, but the political class and the civil service class and the development class need to come together and grasp the nettle on that one, because it would change the city, because you'd have people, out in the city 20 hours a day, requiring playgrounds, requiring civic amenities. It just makes for a different city. So I'd have a strong level of confidence for that one. I think in terms of the CMATs, the Cork Metropolitan Area Transport System, that is fantastic. Undreamt of 10 years ago in terms of the Irish context of planning for the very long term. Given where we are in a climate crisis, we ought to double that. I think, that we need to get certainty on the tram coming from Mahon across to Ballincollig. I can't see why we don't have one from the airport out to Blackpool and Blarney on that side. We need to get much better at it's not the panacea, but the cycle network. Walking is fundamental to towns and cities. We need to improve that experience. Going back to the housing side, whereas we have a very, a multi-billion-pound plan for the transport system, we need to have a plan for the retrofit of housing in the city centre or offices in the city centre, because it won't happen otherwise. The economics don't stack up to put a building or a house above a shop on South Mall at the moment.
Yeah,
and it needs finance for that side. And I suppose the other thing is, we've been drenched this last week in Cork. That's the rains.
Yeah.
But if these storms are coming, then we need to prepare for that in terms of flooding.
Yeah, like I was saying to you before we started, like the Jazz Weekend here, I mean, the influx of people, the vibe in the city, it was fantastic to see. And even though the floods were there, people were dancing through them.
Yeah.
which was brilliant.
Yeah.
But it is that you can imagine if you were coming from abroad, and you were thinking about coming back to Cork, you might come back for the Jazz Weekend, but you might have been sold on coming back to Cork as your regular weekend city breakaway, just because of seeing that. So I think, look, those are important things that need to get sorting and fixed. I know there is plans for that as well. But
I heard an interesting reverse the other day. Family holiday in Montpellier, and they're just not going to their regular family holiday in June, July, because it's been getting too hot. It's just
that's true. Yeah.
So wet feet or sunburn. Yeah. So that'll be interesting. But again, what happened in Middleton is just horrendous.
Yeah.
I can't imagine how stressful that is for the residential and the business community up there. But maybe if it does start to concentrate the mind that we have a serious challenge. Our serious challenge is around flooding. That's our serious challenge. Yeah.
Yeah. But I suppose to go back to the positive side of things, the growth in the city, I didn't realise that the actual Mount Living city centre was going up, because you kind of hear it's always like the suburbs and the catchment area just outside. So that is very positive.
Yeah.
I know there are plans and developments in place for more apartments. Actually, one particular one in the VQ itself, isn't there, near Horgans?
There's between Horgans and Penrose is a planning permission for about 400.
Brilliant.
There's planning permission for about 400. But actually, again, on 5 points, which I think we met in, fantastic New York inspired sort of deli cafe on McCurtain Street. Beside there, the old Garda station is now 9 apartments in it. And that's been derelict for good on 20, 30 years. Where 5 points is, I think there's 5 or 6 above there.
Really? That's great to see.
Yeah, and these are not the big, sexy Docklands
they
things.
compound over time. There's little win.
Yeah. And I think actually, again, that's one of the things I've learned about cities. You need your big infrastructure, right? You need your bus connects, you need your metro and your tram, but you need a whole series of small, discrete little things that add up. You multiply those, and often they're just done by the residents groups or by the residents of the businesses, and they start adding up to something in the way that the VQ has now accumulated in a multi-million euro investment that the council's put in. But it's on the back of the individual entrepreneurs taking a risk in that space and then coming together and talking and so on. So you need the big stuff and the small stuff, and then they start talking in the middle.
Deadly. Looking out 5-10 years, I suppose Cork as a whole maybe, and the VQ itself. What are your dreams and aspirations there?
What are my dreams and aspirations? Well, that we see. No particular order, but I'd say that look, we see the docklands on this side of the river and on the other side of the river built out. That we see. That we see an increased residential population in the area. One of the things I would really like to see is that the city gets much better with its data and its evidence base. So, for example, we could probably sort of retro sort of fit it, or retro sort of find out what it is. But, looking at the air quality in McCurtain Street 3 years ago, say pre-COVID, as against the air quality in 2 years' time, and therefore into the future, that will show, because the traffic volumes will come down, and obviously we're moving to sort of electric vehicles, that the air quality gets better. We'd like to see the footfall, I think, will double over the period of, say, 3 years' time again, but have evidence to show that it does double, and we know it doubles at 6 o'clock and 9 o'clock and whatever it might be on that side. So we see much more activity in the city centre. We see, I'd love to see, we should see transformation in Patrick Street. Although that's on that side of the river, that's the success of Patrick Street in the city centre over there is massively important to this side of the river. It's hand in glove, it's jigsaw pieces, whatever you might call it. I think it's there's some really exciting things over there. But again, it could do with a sort of a VQ-like sort of cohesion of thinking. And at the moment, I don't think that's there. I think it could be quite easily there, because that should be forevermore, our principal street in the city. Some of the things that we want to do, we'd love to close McCurtain Street on occasion during the year, whether it was the marathon or the jazz or the food on a fork at the long table. We have another ambition to bring in a creative hub. So I do tend to be sort of London centric in terms of my examples. But if the Penrose Dock and Organs Quay are the Canary Wharf, that the McCurtain Street side can be the sort of the Shoreditch, and actually that there's a nice interplay between them. There are some significant development sites in the area. We know the Metropole, Trigon have planning permission for an extension just off of Harley Street. We know that the Everyman have ambitions to do up that amazing institution and to get some investment in there. If you look on Google Street View behind McCurtain Street, you'll see actually a lot of it's either car parks or big sheds. And that's not the best use of urban space. So we'll see that sort of transformed. It'd be great to start seeing an embrace of the river. So we're sort of twinning, I think that would be fair to say, with the Cove Chamber. So they're the two ends of this train track, this sustainable train track. And so whether it's residents or visitors to the VQ then having an extended day out by going down to Cove and to Spike, or the arrivals off the ferries coming into Cove, enjoying Cove, and then coming up to the city, and so on and so forth. So on those side of things, and I happen to live up the road, and I would like to see it as a much more child and actually older person friendly place. With the playgrounds, seating, walking, quietness, and that. We don't have the big spaces, or we don't have the formal spaces maybe that Dublin does, but we've got nooks and crannies. And I think that's one of the lovely things about Cork is its nooks and crannies. So maybe, Nano Nagle Place was a particularly large nook and a cranny, but actually there's lots of nooks and crannies. And if we can start opening those up and greening those up and giving that back to, the residents in the city, I think that would be, Cork should work with that asset,
Yeah.
It's not going to find itself in New Stephen's Green or Phoenix Park, but
you don't need massive amounts of space to make something beautiful and to make something functional and to make something people are proud of.
I had an interesting experience. I was in the Cork English College and I was talking to 17-year-old Italian students. I said, tell me what you like and you don't like about Cork. And the thing they said that surprised them and they found difficult was there was nowhere to gather and to sit down. And actually when you talk to older residents, they often say the same as well, that there isn't a place to sit down because, you get tired, you want to sit down. So actually that, I think at heart we are a European city. We're maybe more a Dutch city than an Italian city. We're a trading city at heart. But actually that we turn the ship of state, if you like, around, which has been sort of suburban orientated for maybe 50 years. And actually it comes back to its urban port of call. So look, I'm biased towards cities, but I think it's a marvelous city. It's a beautiful city, and as per McCurtain Street, if you give it a glorified lick of paint, you end up with something beautiful.
Brilliant, Shane. That's fantastic, man. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Thanks for listening to this week's episode of the Business and Marketing Scoop. I really, really hope you enjoyed it. If you did, please make sure to click that subscribe button in Spotify, in Apple Podcasts, and wherever you listen to your podcasts. Each week we have great people on talking about business, talking about marketing, giving amazing value and amazing insights. So please make sure you are subscribed.